In Lecture 1 we have seen that man is essentially boundless, a dynamic consciousness center that has always existed and always will exist, and that carries within all the possibilities existing in the boundless. In this lecture we take a closer look on the mystery of man, and with mystery we do not mean that man is something mysterious or incomprehensible, as sometimes is meant with this word, but that there is a deeper truth or meaning behind than we initially think to know. And this is because we are now mainly focused on the outer man, and behind that outer man is the inner man, in which a number of important processes are taking place. By gaining insight to these, we can give guidance to our lives on a much deeper level and contribute to the totality as a whole. In Lecture 1, we also saw that action and reaction form the root or basis of the development of consciousness. And if we now consider what makes us human beings, it is because we, as human beings, have in common that we have reached the level of thinking. Hence, the word man is derived from the Sanskrit word manas, which means thinking. And because we can think, we have the ability to perceive thoughts and have an interaction with them. The ability to think is a conscious process that allows us to imagine something or to form our vision of reality. By thinking, we are able to compare things in relation to each other and make choices based on considerations. And by expressing our thoughts in words, we can exchange thoughts with each other, which can be seen as sending and receiving thoughts. In this capability of thinking, however, we are by no means perfect. We are, so to speak, still very young and beginning thinkers. In many cases, we are still very much focused on ourselves and lose sight of the connection with the whole. Something we can also see when we observe the problems that arise in the world. A specific aspect of our thinking, of us as thinkers, is that we have self-consciousness. And self-consciousness means both that we can have thoughts about ourselves and that we can see or perceive ourselves in relation to everything else. When we identify primarily with ourselves, it is what we call an I-am-I orientation, also called an orientation based on the personality. We then place ourselves in the center of our thinking and relate the experiences we have to ourselves. And the other way around, when we identify ourselves with the whole and relate our thoughts and actions to it, saying I to the whole, it is called an I am consciousness. We then focus on the inner man and connect with a much higher and broader area of consciousness that include ethical thinking, compassion, wisdom thinking, and unity thinking. Areas that we are often not self-aware of in this phase of our development, but which we can develop within ourselves. This is also what the great teachers show us without exception. They are men who are far ahead of us in wisdom and ethics and have become so at one with all that lives that they have made it their mission in life to teach and guide us on the path. Examples of such men are Plato, Lao Tse, Jesus the Nazarene, and Gautama the Buddha. Now that we have built a picture of our thinking and self-consciousness, we are going to explore how we are composed as human beings. To do this, we can make divisions, and for this lecture, we will make a threefold division, namely a spiritual, immortal part, a learning part, and a transitory or mortal part. The spiritual, immortal part in us is the monad and forms the core of our consciousness. All the faculties and qualities that are available in the cosmos are also available in our core. The immortal part is aware of the unity of all life and has such a complete understanding of the laws and patterns of universal life that it is completely one with it. From this relative highest self in us flows a constant stream of consciousness and inspiration. It is the source of our noblest impulses. Our receptivity to these impulses is often called intuition. These are flashes of reality, the immediate realization of the deeper connection and essential background of life, by which we come to a greater understanding. The learning part is the part of our consciousness that learns to increasingly express the inner abilities of the immortal part. This is the part in which we are active with our self-consciousness, the part to which we say I, in which we learn, have our experiences, and grow. Because this is continued by us, life after life, this part is also called our reincarnating part or reincarnating ego. And one of the highest aspects of the learning part is called the storehouse of the ethical lessons we have learned during the many lives we have already lived as thinkers, and represents our conscience. And then there is the transitory or mortal part, the instrument or vehicle in which we express ourselves, experience, and learn, and of which is the body a part. This part is called mortal because after a period of activity, that is, when we withdraw ourselves into the inner realms, this instrument will fall apart and we have to rebuild it all over again in the next life. If we now, from this threefold division, zoom in on the learning part, we see that this part can focus both on the spiritual immortal part and on the transitory mortal part. When we focus our thinking on the immortal part, we focus on the core or the source of our consciousness. It is impersonal thinking because it transcends our personality. This type of thinking bases itself on unity and interconnectedness and is characterized by insight and understanding, also called wisdom thinking. Our thinking can also focus on our mortal part, which is called personal thinking because the personality is the middle point or center of this type of thinking. It is good to remember that, for example, taking care of the body and personality is not a problem in itself, but when we focus too much on it, we lose sight of the bigger picture and become separated and selfish. This, however, is unfortunately the characteristic we see a lot in the world today. These two orientations of thinking are also called the higher and the lower thinking in man. Now, this basic structure, consisting of an immortal, a learning, and a mortal part, is present in every human being. We all possess the capacity for higher and lower thinking, and therefore we all possess the same potencies and capabilities. At the same time, every human being is different. No human being can be found who deals with these capacities in exactly the same way. So let us now ask ourselves why it is that we have become who we are, why we express ourselves in exactly this way and that we are not different. The answer to that may be not too surprising anymore. We are thinkers. We develop through our thinking, and in doing so, we have become who we are. Every thought we have had in the past has contributed to being who we are. From the preferences and tendencies we have, the way we act and react, and also from how we react to something emotionally, to the shape of our physical body. These are all the result of our thinking. It was therefore the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius who powerfully expressed this thought in the following words: "Your life is what you make of it with your thoughts." Consequently, everything we do is preceded by a thought. You cannot perform an action without a thought or a series of thought preceding it. By the actions we are repeating, we form habitual patterns, and the sum total of these habitual patterns form our character. This can be represented by the following sequence: thought, action, habit, character. Our character then is not something we have built up in this one short life we are living in right now. It is the consciousness that we have developed throughout many and many lives that we have already lived, and that we will continue to develop further and further, both in this life and in future lives. This also explains why we can have talents such as musical aptitude, skillful painting, insight in gardening, or universal wisdom. Everything we develop easily is in fact nothing else as a recapitulation of what we have already mastered in previous lives. And analogously, we can say that aspects for which we must make an effort to manifest them out of ourselves are new to us. These form the field of our growth. Character is derived from the Greek word charasein, which stands for scratching in, which shows that character is the total structure of our expressed consciousness, which is constantly taking shape in cyclical processes. Our character is dynamic. New characteristics are born, old characteristics die out, and the basis for this process is always our thinking. By thinking new thoughts, revising old thought patterns, or not thinking them anymore by replacing them for new ones, we form a basis for acting differently, from which new habitual patterns can develop, leading to changes in our character. Now this will not only have an effect in this life, but also in the ones to come. The direction of our thinking is always the determining factor of our growth. So we can say, you sow a thought, you reap an action. You sow an action, you reap a habit. You sow a habit, you reap a character. You sow a character, you reap an incarnation. And in addition to this, there is another important aspect to be recognized regarding our thinking. It is often thought that thinking thoughts is toll-free, that we have no influence on others through our thinking, but nothing less is the case. As thinkers, we are also senders and receivers of thoughts. When we share thoughts with others, we transmit thoughts. But also when we are thinking and do not share them directly, we also transmit them and contribute to the thought atmosphere or thinking climate in the world. Just as there is a certain influence from the weather, there also emanates a certain influence from this thought atmosphere. And in addition, we are also receivers of thoughts. Thoughts of the most varying quality are broadcasting during the whole day. And the thoughts we receive from this mass, especially when we are not conscious of it, make an impression on us, how slightly this may be. These thoughts find home in us, and especially when this takes place over a longer period of time, it can have an impact on our character. So, with our thinking, we not only give direction to our development, but because we are part of the whole, we also contribute with our thinking to the development of the whole. And with every thought we think and every action we perform, we are contributing to it. We thereby are responsible for our thinking. When we are so self-centered in our thinking and actions that we lose sight of the whole, or, in other words, when we are tuned to our character with a small c, when we are separated and contribute to disharmony. However, when we think and act in such a way that in everything we do we are aligned with the whole, or in other ways, when we are in alignment with our character with a capital C, we contribute to the harmony of the whole. Therefore, we do not ever need to think that we have no influence or that what we do does not count. In fact, everything always contributes to everything. Just as one ray of light can illuminate a room, or one particle of salt can change the taste of food, so can one impersonal thought bring change in the overall perspective of the thinking collective in the world. Now, we have indicated that we form our habit patterns and character with our thinking. These habit patterns and our character in their turn form the basis for our thought process, and when we are not attentive or alert to this, we continue to reinforce our habitual thinking and get stuck in a kind of loop, so to speak. Especially when the thinking is of a personal nature, we can become so identified or so entangled with it that we can hardly imagine that other ways are also possible, and consequently our growth will be obstructed. To transcend such habitual thinking and habitual acting, we need a wedge to open the molds of our thinking, to step out of the ingrained pattern of thinking, to become more and more self-aware of our thinking and the influence it has on our environment. Doing this, we can shift the center of our consciousness from personal to impersonal thinking. To stimulate this development, in the following part of this lecture, we will give you a number of steps that can help us to form a new paradigm of thinking. By applying these steps daily and consistently as a continuous process, we can weave these steps as a habitual pattern into our character. The first step is to form a vision of life based on universal principles, in which we focus on the unity and the quality of all life. When we build this vision, we strive to make it so inspiring that it becomes for us worth everything to commit ourselves to make it a living power in our lives. And in doing so, we can, for example, build a vision of the ideal society. What would this world look like? And in doing so, we should remember that we are not doing this in negative terms by saying there will be no more poverty or no more disease. We do this in positive terms. For example, by forming a vision of how people would then cooperate with each other and cooperate with other kingdoms of nature, or how problems that we encounter in life will be solved and what principles we apply by solving them. Step by step, we can develop our vision further and further. A next step could be not only to look at the outer world, but also to examine how the inner processes in life take place. When, for example, we gain insight into the processes of life and death, or examine the processes of cause and effect, we can acquire more and more wisdom about the inner life, or the inner processes of nature, by which we can increasingly develop or perfect our vision of life. And when we focus on our vision of life, when we reflect on the inner processes of nature or on how problems we see in the world can be solved, we make our thinking more receptive to our intuition, and we connect more and more with our impersonal part. Building a vision of life is a boundless process that can be worked on repeatedly. But for now, we will leave it for a moment and move on to the second step. But at the end of this symposium, we will come back to this subject and inform you on what can be done to build a vision of life further and in what way our organization can support you in this. Well, we worked on it. We have formed a vision. Then the next step is to activate this vision every day. For as sublime our vision of life may be, it would only remain of limited value if we were not to make it into an active power in life. For this purpose, Catherine Tingley, the third leader of the Theosophical Society, recommends that every morning, immediately after awaking, we focus our thinking on our ideal and set aside everything that has to do with lower thinking, so that our thinking is not drawn to external matters and our ideal vision can become the keynote for the day. The third step is aligning our thinking and acting throughout the whole day on the keynote we have formed in the morning. Not to strive for, because then we make it something we place outside of it, but assuming it, so that everything we do during the day breathes the sphere of our vision. In the broadest sense that we can imagine, in the choices we make, the thoughts we have, the conversations we have, or the questions we face during the day, we are constantly a living expression of our vision of life. And this is not a process we can do alone. Growth and learning we do primarily in interaction, in acting and reacting, on and with each other. Everything in the universe is based on cooperation, and cooperation is therefore the best way to overcome the personality. Because in cooperation, we learn how to support the whole in the best way we can. Now, and during the day, when we encounter difficult choices or dilemmas, which are typically situations where ethical questions arise, or where we are moved up and down between our personal and impersonal part, these are typical situations where our conscience can speak up by giving us a sign. And by listening to our conscience in these situations, we are able to do the right thing and restore harmony. Then at the end of the day, we make space for the fourth step. Before sleeping, we look back on the day. We look for things we could have done better or possibly failed to do. We don't do this to make up a balance, but we do this to learn from and to build upon. And after that, we end the day with an elevating thought. Then we draw back into the inner realms during sleep and wake up strengthened the next day. Thus, we go to a process by which we grow from the personal to the universal man. Thereby, we increasingly experience ourselves as a self-conscious part of the whole and contribute to the society based on brotherhood as fact in nature.